Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson. I'll be your host once again. And as per last week, it's just me and Scott. Scott, how you doing this evening?
I'm good, Ben. I'm really good. It's good to be back as always. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Lots happened despite only having having one less game this weekend, but we've definitely got a lot of action to get into. And obviously the Challenger is back and that threw up a couple of big results, I guess we could say, near the top and bottom of the table. But let's first go around the Pro League. Eupen versus Genk was snowed off on Friday. Quite surprising it did come a little bit later in the day because judging by the pictures that were coming out from East Belgium, it just looked like there was no chance. Even if, I think we were saying, even if they got the whole of Eupen out to try and clear the pitch, it just was never going to happen. Let's quickly go around the league without the Genk Eupen game. So we had Zultewaregem against Westerlo. That one finished 1 apiece. Mechelen and Kortrijk played out a 5-goal thriller. That one finished 3-2 to Mechelen. Oostende lost at the death to Cercle Bruges. Particularly painful one there. Union, they beat Leuven 1-0 at home. Antwerp absolutely trounced Standard 4-1. Anderlecht kept it close, I guess, against Seraing, and that one finished just 1-0 to the away side. Anderlecht means Seraing have now gone an entire year, or will go an entire year without a home win in the league, that is. Club Brugge came from 2-0 down to draw 2-2 at home to Charleroi. And then Sint-Truiden down to 10 men. Very controversial there. We'll definitely talk about that. That one finished 3-0 to Ghent. So let's start with Zultewaregem against Westerlo. Probably, we presume, it should be Lyle Foster's last game at the club. It looks like he will be on his way to Burnley. I think it's reported around about €7 million, which I think is, good business for Westerlo, to be honest. I'm not sure about that price tag, but if they're going to offer it, they're going to offer it and you're going to take it. I think they've played hardball and they've done very well there. He was involved in the opening goal. Short corner routine found him at the back post. He knocked it down. And at the other back post, I guess you could say, switching them around, Roman Neustadt, of all people, tapped it home in the 9th minute. Zultewaregem were kind of happy, I guess, in the sense that they got Jelle Vossen back, and it was he who got them back into the game. Coming off the bench, second half, really nice cross, actually, from Alexander Lambayev. And Vossen just absolutely bullied, I think it was Tagier in the box. Just outmuscled him to head that one into the back of the net. They were quite lucky, actually, Zultewaregem, that Dismas was on the line at one point to stop what looked to be a certain goal. And how he didn't handball it, I have absolutely no idea. Really impressive from the young Tanzanian. Zulta had a lot of possession in this one, Scott, about 60%, 12 shots to Westerlo's 13 shots. So teams, both of them had their chances. So I guess probably in the end, I'll look at it and think that's a fair result, all things considered. Eupen, obviously watching from afar, were probably hoping that Westerlo would do them a favour, not to be, which means now Zulta and Eupen are level on points. Eupen's obviously game in hand is against Genk, so it's a particularly difficult one, but I guess as Zulta, they'll be happy that they at least came away from the game with a point.
Yeah, I thought they were decent this weekend. I saw all of this game and quite enjoyed it. I've been making a kind of concerted effort to see a little bit more of Zulta over the last few weeks, particularly since Ruud Vormer and Christian Bruls have come in, because I just wanted to see how that changed things. And there have been a lot of positive changes, things we were kind of hinting about last week. I felt this week, again, those improvements were there. I think they just lacked a little bit of bravery on the ball this week. They had more possession, and as I was saying last week, their possession stats have actually been all trending in the right direction since Bruls and Vormer come in. So that positive effect that they've had immediately seems to be maintained. Their numbers are much more encouraging, as we highlighted last week. But I just felt this week, despite having more of the ball and looking not too bad at all, they just lacked a little bit of bravery. When I was watching it, I was thinking, I was looking for a run or a through ball or somebody just to play the positive pass. But there was a little bit of hesitation in their play, and sometimes you see that in Zulta when they play at home. Funnily enough, I don't know if it's you mentioned Seraing, and we'll get to them in a little while and their issues. But sometimes sides kind of clam up a little bit at home, and I don't know if that's what happened here. I think it took them until they got their equaliser, till Jelle Vossen scored, before they really let loose. And inside that last 15 minutes or so, they looked much the better of the two sides and the one that was really going for it. There's a general feeling while watching this that Westerlo could have scored every time they kind of went forward. Jonas de Rox had them playing quite good football all season, and they do look good going forward. They know where the goal is, and they are a reasonably effective side when it comes to efficiency and incisiveness. Yeah, Zalta could have won this. I mean, quite easily, I think, in another day. Like I say, if they'd been a bit braver on the ball. I mean, their form actually recently has been quite good. It's had the upturn that they've wanted. The last 4 games, I think they've got 7 out of 12 points, which is not bad. Particularly when you look at the form that they came into post World Cup as well. So they're right back in it at the moment, and of course they're sitting in that position down at the bottom where another win or draw, depending on results, will take them out of that bottom 3. And as we've been saying for a couple of weeks now, they're alive and kicking. I thought they were much better actually. You mentioned Alexander Drambeev. I thought they were much better when he came on round about the hour mark. He was doing the one thing that a lot of players were not doing, and that was looking for the forward pass and the line breaking pass. And yeah, for a left back to be probably your most incisive player isn't ideal, but I think he did make a difference. And actually, he's been quite an important player for them. I think it'd be nice to see if they can hold on to him. Because I think he's brought something kind of missing from the side, and they do play better, I think, when he's in the side. But he definitely made an improvement when he came on. Zalta have got some very interesting fixtures coming up. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about how difficult the sort of next 6 weeks would be for them, and they're picking up points where you might not expect it, which is obviously a good sign. But February, the next couple of weeks sees them play Oostende at home and Seraing away. Now, they are obviously massive games, and if they could win both of those, then that would completely change the complexion of their season, I think, and can only affect their confidence in all the right ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're just absolute relegation 6-pointers. And to be fair to them, like kind of looking at it, we know like historically they've been one of the worst defences in the league for a couple of seasons now. Now I think they're like only the 4th worst defence, which like doesn't sound like something to celebrate, but it's a pretty big improvement just this season to be like, okay, like Oostende are by miles the worst defence, but then the other teams kind of around them, they've got a better defensive record than Seraing, Kortrijk, obviously Oostende. So those kind of 3 teams, they're just one goal off kind of open in terms of defensive like improvement. So the more that changes, kind of the better that it's going to be for them, because we know they can score goals. And yeah, I'm glad you highlighted Drambeev, because I know that Mbaile's talked about him a lot when he's not been there, and he's always kind of mentioned him on the injury list. And I feel like if a manager is going to talk about a player that's injured, if they're not kind of part of the plans, they probably won't really mention it. If you know what I mean, they'll probably be like, if they're just kind of like a fringe player. But I think he sees his importance and value to the squad. And it means Paul Dismas doesn't have to always play kind of left back, because I think he's played almost everywhere across the midfield and left back and defence and all that sort of stuff. So kind of having a more natural left-sided defender in there. Obviously, they also got that win against Anderlecht during the week, which is a massive result for them. So these 2 results, kind of 4 points from the week, is probably something they'd have been aiming for. For Westerlo, that's now just 1 win in 5. There was a loss midweek to Genk, which, again, you can kind of understand. They kind of were a little bit sloppy in that one. But this one they'd have probably hoped to have won, given some of the results that went around them. So, yeah, the playoff 2 run is definitely really tight. Like, if you look at Anderlecht, we'll talk about them, but they're now right back into the playoff 2 hunt. Charleroi are in the playoff 2 hunt. Mechelen are kind of a win away from being in the playoff 2 hunt, but also a loss away from being massively in the relegation battle. So it is really tight and congested there. And you kind of don't want to hit a bad run of form at a bad time. Let's now talk then about Mechelen, kind of moving on to them. They played against Kortrijk at home, which was just, a massive game. And they kind of all are at the moment, any of these sides playing each other. We saw a bit of Dion de Neve, which is nice, kind of talking about Zulte Waregem. He obviously made the move across kind of the rivals, which, not always the wisest thing to do, and he hasn't really had the game time, which has been a shame, because when we saw him at Zulte Waregem, he was quite an impressive young player. He did a really nice finish actually in the 33rd minute to give Kortrijk the lead. However, Nicola Storm replied within about 4 minutes to level things up. Kernan Relabti then scored with a really nice header, actually, really nice run across the defence, flicking it back across. Getting him back fit and scoring goals would be massive for Mechelen, given the lack of scoring prowess they've had. Into the second half, and Cadley it was who got Kortrijk back in the game. Really nice finish from the outside of the box past Kook. He then gave the little kind of Cristiano Ronaldo celebration, which is always like it's a bit of an eye roll, isn't it? When people that aren't Cristiano Ronaldo do it. It always kind of winds me up. But it's his thing, just let him do it. Come up with your own celebration. Then that man, Julian Ngoy, he's been injured so much recently, and it's nice to see him kind of getting back on the pitch. He gets Mechelen back ahead in the 73rd minute with a nice finish. He then celebrates with the ball boy, and then a random kid fan runs onto the pitch to celebrate with him. The steward notices and literally just kind of points nonchalantly mate, do you mind just getting back in there? No kind of sense of urgency that this fan's just come on the pitch. It was just yeah, just get back in, which I thought was a bit funny. But yeah, Mechelen escape, I guess you could say, with a win in this one, which is big because it now puts the gap between them and Kortrijk to 4 points, which is just a nice buffer to have. It then increases the gap to the bottom to 5 points. You take away 2 of those if they had been the draw, and yeah, it'd be really, really tight. Scott, were you, as the man with the Mechelen kind of lens on things, this was a big win, wasn't it, for Stephen Defoe? And I don't think they should be thinking now we can push on for playoff 2. I think their thoughts should just be let's build this kind of gap between those bottom sides as big as possible now.
Yeah, I suspect there'll be quite a lot of relief around the Achterda Kazerne after that result. This was I think a much bigger game, probably for both sides than a lot of people realise. You started off by mentioning Dion Denev, actually, a player who almost went to Lierse recently, but that deal didn't happen for various reasons in the end. And he's obviously got his head back down again, and got himself a goal this past weekend. I think the big thing from Mechelen's point of view is obviously Kieran Merabti coming back and Julian Ngoy coming back, and Ngoy being a player who's not really made a great impact at the club yet, but kind of coming back from that period out and scoring will do his confidence the world good. Same for Merabti, who we know can pitch in with goals and has some quality about him as well. So getting them both back is at this time particularly will be a big relief to Stephen Defoe. Decent stuff from Mechelen, decent stuff. I'm always going on about their output numbers. People will probably be getting bored of me talking about that now, but on that particular subject this week, their output numbers I thought were fine, nothing to worry about there, and generally a better performance, and that's obviously linked to players like Merabti and Ngoy coming back into the side. Nicola Storm having a great game. I thought he's not had a game as good as that in quite a while, so they'll be hoping that this is the start of a period of reasonably consistent form for him, because he's actually had a very quiet season this season, I think. Obviously there was a lot of speculation in the summer that he might be moving, but he's on a long-term deal there at Mechelen, and I think the potential cost of interested parties purchasing him has scared a few people off, which was their intention. But yeah, I mean, the big players are back now. They just need to keep them fit. Heeremans he had a good game as well. So you Heeremans, Rabti, Storm, Scoofs, if they can keep these players fit and playing reasonably well, then they'll be able to relax a little bit. But I think they'll need a few more points yet. Kortrijk continuing to play quite well, actually. All the signs are still encouraging for them. I think they just need to keep doing what they're doing, and they stand just as much of a chance as Zalta, I would say, at the moment of escaping the drop. The Bern Stork effect has had the bounce that they hoped, and the key thing for me is the mindset has definitely changed inside that camp. They're now playing like a side who believe they can get things out of games. They're playing more positively, and they're not playing within themselves. So all the indications are that if they keep doing that, then they'll be there or thereabouts for staying up. So it's as far as the bottom sides are concerned at the moment, it's getting very interesting if you're Kortrijk or Zalta, because they've had the bounces that they've been looking for since we've come back from that World Cup break.
Yeah, no, definitely. They've gone about it in different ways, haven't they? Zalta have gone for the new player bounce, and Kortrijk have gone for the new manager bounce. And I mean, yeah, everything that's coming out of Kortrijk from the players' mouths is this is so much better than it was under Kustovic, which is just like you kind of knew it, you could see it, and it just was quite obvious. Like, Elian Kusmut does a really good job for Het Nieuwsblad. Apologies, Elian, if you are listening, I've butchered your name, but he's got some great interviews with some of the players that have come out, like Stipe Lonkar, talking about playing in a completely different role and how he's now doing a lot more kind of like lung busting displays in midfield, and he gets off the pitch and feels horrific, but knows he's put in a shift. Watanabe, wasn't it, this week? He was saying he's happy at Kortrijk, but there's no good sushi in the city for him. It's just like, come on, man, someone get this man some good sushi. Like, he deserves it after some of the performances he's been putting in.
Just to the sushi point, I think he was saying, wasn't he, that I did notice he said that Lille is the next
Place to
closest
go.
place, to go for quality sushi. So, if you're in and about Kortrijk or anywhere in West Flanders and you're looking for sushi, it was Watanabe who's given us all a heads up that, pop across the border to Lille if you get a chance, or pick up the phone and you might find somewhere that will charge you a reasonable fee for a home delivery of sushi.
Love it, love it. Yeah, no. Or if you're thinking of a nice business prospect in course, like a sushi shop for Watanabe is definitely the way. They also were on the other end of a 3-2 win during the midweek. We forgot to mention they did beat Seraing 3-2, which obviously is a really, really big result for them. But I think Stork's probably having a little bit of the jitters with the amount of goals they're conceding. That just he won't be pleased with that, and we know he won't be pleased with that. And that's despite of some improved performances. And I have to say, for Kortrijk, it is strange that they're in this luxurious position that the next team we'll talk about definitely aren't in, where they've got two very, very good goalkeepers now. Like Tom Vandenberg's come in and he's been really, really solid. And then they've got Ilic. Ilic can't get back in the side, but Ilic was incredible before the injury and the illness that kept him out. Then Vandenberg's just kind of stepped in and taken his place. So yeah, they are in a very kind of fortunate position in terms of that. They'll just hope that kind of the back line in front could put in a couple of more improved performances, which they had been doing over the past couple of weeks. It's just these last two games they've conceded a bit, which I presume has come from kind of the desire to push forward and win the game against the sides kind of in and around them, as opposed to kind of when they play against Genk or someone like that, where they will just sit in. Goalkeepers, we got to talk about Oostende. They lost again in the midweek. They lost 3-0 to Antwerp, and I mean, Antwerp just kind of steamrolled them. Really, really, really strong display from Antwerp, and it could have been a lot more. They came up against Cercle Bruges, which was obviously kind of a big game in the sense that it's Dominic Thalhammer against Miron Muslic. Muslic already took his job at Cercle. Thalhammer then goes to Oostende, probably wants to prove a point to Carlos and that. And I mean, none of those guys will say it, but we kind of can just speculate and make a little bit more of a story out of it than it probably is. Although apparently they didn't take a picture. There wasn't a picture between the two or something. I don't know if I misread that, so apology if that is wrong, but I don't know. Tensions building. However, it was Cercle who took the lead in this one. The ball from CK, if it's meant for Ueda, it's a fantastic ball. It looked like it was meant for Denki, but Denki just leaves it for Ueda. Ueda round Phillips and puts it in. Just so composed from Ueda to just take the goalkeeper out of the equation completely and finish that to give Cercle a 1-0 lead. They had, I think, 11 shots, 6 on target in this one. Only 46% possession, but I think they don't always need the ball. And it's kind of interesting because both of these sides, in theory, should be playing the way that Cercle want to play, if you get what I mean, because they brought in Thalhammer because he suited the system they wanted to play. They then moved to Muslic because they thought he kind of can adapt and suit the system a little bit better. So this should have been two teams very evenly kind of approaching the game in a very similar way. Oostende did get back into the game through a penalty. Thierry Ambrose, who I think he's been linked to Hull, I think you told us earlier, Scott, which is a bizarre one. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. But yeah, he steps up and puts the penalty away. No Mayeki in goal for Cercle. So obviously that makes scoring a penalty like 10 times easier because that man just can save anything from the spot, basically. I think, he's on a ridiculously good kind of penalty save to penalties face ratio at the moment. And that's how it stayed until the 91st minute. Dino Hotic comes on. A couple of minutes later, Dino Hotic makes the difference. Really lovely ball across. I can't remember who played the ball across. I can't remember if it was Gamboa or Deman. I think it was Deman. Hotic just kind of places it into the back of the net. Good travelling support, actually, for Cercle Bruges. We're not used to seeing, because they unbridle the sides of it, it always looks a bit sparse with the fans in there. But they really did pack into that Oostende away end and it's one of those, you just like, you could just feel the silence around the home end and the absolute joy in the away end. And if you're in the home end, it's the worst feeling. But if you're an away fan, it is the best feeling in the world, a last minute winner away from home. And yeah, really interesting. Dr. Mukherjee, after, I think he just posted it today. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. Kind of like someone asked him about Dylan Phillips in the Oostende goal and kind of what his kind of opinions are on him. So he obviously brought out all the data, and Phillips, unfortunately for him, he's basically at the bottom, I think, in terms of the statistics for goalkeepers who have played X amount of minutes in the Pro League this season. Part of that, I do feel it's a little bit unfair on him. I think he has faced a lot more shots than people probably should. But the doctor goes into he does kind of like talk about all the stats and the data and how he's compiled it. So it is really interesting. If you're into that sort of stuff, I would really recommend it. But Scott, we've kind of talked about, and I know Joris has had as well, where we actually thought Graham Hubert was having one of his better seasons before he got dropped in that kind of in replacement with Phillips instead. But Oostende have had a goalkeeper problem since we basically started this podcast, haven't they? And they've tried to fill it in different ways with different players, but just it hasn't seemed to work. Compare that to Courtois, you've got two goalkeepers that could get into most teams in the Pro League, and it's just like there's a reason this side is the worst defence in the league. I mean, the defence is it's letting the side down, even in this one where, in theory, they conceded better than they normally do.
On the goalkeeping front, from an Oostende point of view, I always felt personally that Hubert wasn't that bad a keeper. I think he's okay. I think his footwork actually is pretty decent, which we know how important that is to modern goalkeepers to be good with your distribution. I think he was very unlucky to lose his place in the side. And actually, Oostende have been, you were talking about how goalkeeping's been a problematic position for them. They've been mucking about with that, for a little bit now, and it still seems to be, a bit of an Achilles heel for them. And I have seen Oostende fans saying, well, surely the solution is to bring Hubert back in and just tell him, he's the man and that's it, it's settled now. It's a slightly strange one because, for a side who obviously have been conceding too many goals, to have a long-standing issue where your goalkeeper is only piling the pressure on because, you need to start from the back, obviously, with that solid base. And if there's uncertainty around that, then it kind of doesn't matter how settled your defence is or not. It's going to create uncertainty naturally anyway. But it was really interesting to see some of those numbers. I didn't realise that he was, and the good doctor described him as, and I quote, subpar for this level. And looking at the numbers, unfortunately, as harsh as that might sound, that's the way it is. And, he was also highlighting the fact that I think 5 of the 6 of the recent goals they've conceded are not directly down to him, but certainly indirectly. And he's conceding more than he should as well, which, again, to be fair to Dylan Phillips, isn't always down to the goalkeeper. For a side that isn't performing well, you have to take a range of factors into account. But it is a bit worrying, actually. It is a bit worrying. The overall situation at Oostende's worrying, to be honest. The good ship Oostende at the moment is sinking pretty fast. Some of their underlying numbers are all going in the wrong direction as well. So there's a lot for Dominic Thalhammer to be worried about, I think, at the moment. I think I suppose if you're in Dominic's situation, you have to keep working hard and hope that something turns at some point. They're playing not great at the moment, I don't think. There are spells in games, sort of 10 or 15 minute spells, maybe 20-minute spells where they look all right, and then there are huge chunks of a game where they're not really in it, and they're not turning up for enough of games really to get points out of it. There's this inconsistency about them that's been in there for kind of quite a while, which is kind of a strange one, because you're talking about the similarities between Oostende and Circle, and there's been a lot of really close games between these two sides over the last couple of years at least, and that's because of how similar the systems are. They basically play the same system. They both like to play 3-4-2-1. where possible. They both have the same general identity in terms of their style of play. You know what I mean? They like a high intensity, aggressive press. They like to go for the high turnovers. And those kind of identity things in terms of their style of play, Oostende are just, not really hitting the mark with them at all at the moment. Don't know why that is. I mean, I was speculating last week briefly, wasn't I, that obviously, for those who don't know, the club are unofficially up for sale at the right price. So there's obviously a degree of turmoil off the pitch at the moment as well, which I feel is probably affecting the atmosphere inside. Because that would explain to me why there's inconsistency and just some issues around the body language and those things that I like to look for. Just things aren't kind of quite right there at all. I suspect Cerca will have been delighted to get away with the win in this game, particularly in the manner you were saying. It's always great. Ben's absolutely right. It's always great to score a stoppage time winner. That's always a big boost as well to your confidence. That I think. But yeah, there's a little bit of spice in this. Of course, nobody really talked about it coming into it, but there can't not be. Coaches that used to work together coming up against each other. As well. And on a personal level, they'll have both wanted to win this, absolutely both wanted to win it. Interestingly, neither coach was actually asked or addressed each other in their pre-match press conferences, which I thought was kind of interesting because I would certainly have asked them both because, how can you not? There's a story there that's just, irresistible, I think. Good win for Circle. I mean, obviously they've not perhaps picked up some of the points they would have hoped in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So that'll be one that will just kind of settle things down and reassure them that what they're doing is still on the right track. An interesting one and a hard one for Oostende to take in light of, other results going on around there as well. And yeah, they need to get some points on the board because it's just, you have a feeling where things are getting away from them. And I think the word I would use at the moment is free fall.
Yeah, it is very much a free fall moment, isn't it, for them? And I mean, we kind of spoke about it a little bit earlier, but the games they've got coming up, Kortrijk next week, lose that, you're getting more and more cut adrift. Anderlecht and then Zulte game. You lose the Zulte game, you're hoping that Eupen are going to be losing and these other teams are going to lose, but they've signed, like Zulte Waregem and Kortrijk have kind of signed players or done what they need to do to kind of readjust and kind of change their approach. Whereas Oostende's transfer strategy, obviously we have no idea how much Dominic Dalhammer actually has a say in that. He probably has asked for certain positions and then they go out and get them. And I mean, they hit on a couple under Blessing, but it feels like recently kind of they just haven't hit on many of those transfers that they've brought in. Like they've been inconsistent, they've been injured a fair amount, or they just haven't performed to the level that the club really needs them to. And then you look at, I was watching obviously some Challenger highlights and I saw Michael Biron score, I think 2 goals. And if you're an East End fan, you're watching that and you're pointing and being like, what is he doing in that league? Not getting a chance for us in this league. Like, what are we doing? We bought this guy and we loaned him off to Nodsey. They get relegated. We sell him to Molenbeek. It's like, that's what and you can understand the frustration of the fans. And like, I do get it. And I look at this squad now, and in the past, I thought, yeah, some of these players they're good players. There's some players that you're like, yeah, no, I'd have them. You'd think that I'd have them in this team, in that team, but as a collective, they just don't seem to perform well together at all, do they? Like the defense is always kind of all over the place. We talk about the keeper, Blessing, like Phillips is. If the defense is leaking stuff towards him, there's not much he can actually do if they're going to not defend. You got players like Sakamoto, who you know is a good player, but his output in terms of assists and goals isn't quite there yet. You've obviously missing Hornby. We spoke about that last week, but we're not going to speak about it again. Kenny Rocha Santos, I'm a big Kenny Rocha Santos fan, but I think he needs someone like a Diarpino next to him. Amade, not quite sure what his strong suit is. Like, we've seen some good performances from him, we've seen some performances. I'm just going through the side now. Tio Ndika, he's going to work hard, he's going to put a shift in, but has he got the quality that he's not good? Is he got the quality that they need at this moment? Nick Betzler scored a couple of good goals. So you're looking at him to do that still. Thierry Ambrose hasn't scored a lot, but he gives the energy and the pressing. And then Durdorf is an unknown quantity. We don't know. I didn't watch this one, so I don't know. Did you, like, with Durdorf, what did you get any impression about kind of what his kind of strong suit is, I
Well,
guess.
I mean, one of the things I've noticed about Oostende actually is obviously they've brought in a number of players, which you would expect them to because of the situation they're in. But there's a feeling a little bit, certainly in my part, that it's a bit scattergun, I think. I think they're trying to add players to that
Mm.
squad in the hope that it improves the depth and quality a little bit without really knowing whether it will. And because of other transfer cock-ups, for want of a description. You mentioned Michael Byron. I mean, that's one that got away from them. That they had, he was in the building, and then he was kind of discarded before getting started, and now looks like actually a decent player. Very strange one. So there's been disquiet, certainly amongst the Coast Boys fan base, I would say, for a while now, about how they've been going about their recruitment and kind of why. And not much has been working for them generally. So there's definitely questions there. I don't think Durdov's shown enough yet, to be honest. I think he's obviously somebody who has interested them. And they kind of have to kind of show their faith in him really at the moment. Obviously they're waiting for Big Fraser Hornby to come back. That's really what they're waiting for. Yeah, just players not making enough of an impact, and lots of people there just don't seem happy to me at the moment, and that's playing into it as well. So it's a really difficult one for them, and they've got massive games kind of coming up, and they have to get something out of them to stay within that kind of reaching distance of being able to kind of climb out of the basement.
Yeah, 100%. They brought in Kelvin Arase, 7 games for Karlsruhe, and I think he got like 1 assist in that time. I mean, it seems a bit kind of. I know they both came from Germany. They're both wingers, David Atanga kind of style transfer, doesn't it? And they look like
Mm.
they've got very identical profiles, judging from kind of like what I've seen
Mm.
of like kind of highlights and that of the two of them. But again, scattergun is definitely the word. And then I just kind of wanted to compare that to what we see from Circle. And obviously, different. They've got the Monaco link and stuff like that, so
Mm-hmm.
they can tap into that a little bit. Obviously, well, not a little bit. They can just tap into that. But then they do bring in some of these other younger players. And I just look. You think Leonardo da Silva Lopez? We know Carlos is a massive fan of Leonardo da Silva Lopez, and he's kind of shocked that he's still there. He didn't even need to come on the pitch in this one because they got Abu Francis that they brought in, who's performed really, really well.
Yeah.
Dino Hotic is on the bench. Like they can bring him on and make an impact, change the game in that sort of way. And then they've got just kind of some solid players on like their bench. I'm looking down it for this sort of a fixture. They've got players that can come on and impact again. Yanga Emilio Carrera didn't get on, but we saw him when we went to watch them, and I liked kind of the
Yeah.
energy that he brought. Jean Marcelin, obviously, some people on this podcast aren't a massive fan, but he's like a decent centre back. Christian Ravic, I think, is probably the better centre back at the moment, and it's good to see him getting more game time. But yeah, I mean, the difference in terms of that was what Thalhammer's got to work with at Oostende to bring on is, yeah, they've got work to do in the window, but I feel like they've kind of done a lot of work, but it doesn't feel like it's good work compared to the likes of Zulte Waregem we've brought in, Ruud Vorm and Christian Bulls. And you're like, yes, those are players that you think can make an impact. So it's going to be interesting. Let's talk about Union against Leuven. Union obviously drew with Circlet in the midweek 1-1. Dante Vanzia picked up an injury and went off. Massive rumours about him going to New York. Looks like he wants to go to New York, which is a little bit of a surprise, in my opinion, from a guy that looked like he was kind of on the like pushing the Red Devils. I don't think he's got the finishing for being a Red Devil. I think he'd need to really improve on that. But you just think you're performing really well at a very good European club now that can qualify for European football. Why would you want to leave? But I'm sure there's some financial incentives to go to America and live in New York. I'm sure it'd be quite fun. But Brussels is fun as well. But yeah, so he wasn't there for this one, which means big Gustav Nielsen started alongside Victor Boniface. Probably one of the tallest strike partnerships we've seen in the league this season. And it was a competitive game, I guess you could say. Leuven had more of the possession, but Union had more of the chances. 19 shots to Leuven's 12. 0-0 at half time. There were some chances, yeah, for either side, as I said, in the first half. No Mario Gonzalez again for Leuven. He's still nursing the injury. I think Beers is being a little bit careful in terms of when he brings him back. I think he's just going to want to bring him back too soon. Musa Altamari on the bench. He is heavily linked with a move away. Thibaut Vlentic started. I just don't really know what he is. Like, is he a fullback? Is he a winger? Like, he's always kind of just been like, he's just there, and I've never known what he does. And he'll just randomly play like a game like this every season for them, and they'll bring him back on loan, and then they bring him in permanently or bring him back on loan. Like it's all this kind of strange way the Team of Olympics experience, I guess. Bless him, but I don't think he made much of an impact on this game. However, it was that man Gustav Nielsen that made the difference in this one. Loic Lapoussin with a really, really excellent rapid cross. Basically, Nielsen put his body on the line by sticking his head on it, because that almost took his head off. Like he went flying when the ball hit him in the head. It just like propelled him backwards. But the ball found the back of the net, and he just seems to have this habit, doesn't he, of scoring kind of winning goals or important goals, which is what he's done since he's moved to Union. I think they're saying his goals to minutes ratio is really, really good. I still don't know what I think about him. Like, because there's moments where I'm like, oh, this guy just looks way out of his depth. But then he can do this, and it's like, well, who cares? Do you know what I mean? Like, if he may be kind of a little bit awkward, a little bit gangly, but if he's going to put the ball in the back of the net and win you a game like this, like, who cares? I guess.
Yeah, he's a difficult customer, is Mr. Nielsen. I quite like him for those reasons, and he's shown for a player who, I suppose, when he came in, wasn't getting many opportunities. He's also done very well at a European level for Union as well. You know, scored a number of important goals for them this season. Just a very handy player who extremely good in the air. Not unsurprisingly, leave him unmarked, put the ball in his head, like Ghent did in the cup recently, and you're asking for footballing kind of suicide, but quite a useful player all round. I think his all round game's kind of quite good. I hesitate to compare him to Peter Crouch, but physically, when you see him play, that's exactly what he reminds me of. Funnily enough, such as the gangly nature of the pair of them, as you were just describing. But yeah, quite a useful striker on the whole, who's underrated, and somebody who knows where the goal is again. He's difficult to deal with, and in a league like the Pro League, which is very physical. He's got he's multifaceted, which is really important as well. And I think a lot of defenders struggle to deal with a player like that. I think his movement's decent, and for such a big guy, he has a bit of pace about him and reasonable technique as well. So definitely an underrated player. Union changing up the side a little bit this weekend for various reasons, but managing to get the job done because they're such a good side, as we kind of keep saying. And no matter who's playing, the energy and the objective is the same. And the really exciting thing for Karel Geerts, of course, and he was talking about this recently, about how he wants the big games to keep coming thick and fast. He's really enjoying playing in three fronts still. They seem to be responding really, really well to that. And the little bits of rotation and little changes are not impacting on any way negatively in the side at the moment, and that's good for everybody's confidence in the squad and their fitness, I think. And that incredible team spirit there is obviously still a factor in them being able to continually keep up with the pace, particularly in the league as well, because recently Genk have been playing ahead of Union over the course of weekends, which puts a little bit of pressure on them, obviously, because they know the result, and often they've been having to go into games knowing that they need to win to kind of keep the pressure on Genk as well, which is a difficult pressure to handle on an ongoing basis in itself. But they're absolutely doing that at the moment, and there's more squad depth there, I think, than there was last year. There's a bit more experience. I think generally they're a better side. We've talked about this a little bit than they were last year, and kind of have exceeded expectations again, and continue to do so, I think.
That's the difference this year. Is like, obviously last year you were kind of worried if Undavo Vanzia went down, you'd have to play Avenatti, and while he's doing pretty all right at Kortrijk, he just would never have fitted the system there. Whereas this system under Gerrits, you can play, because Boniface is obviously a big physical striker as well, but Nielsen can kind of just do kind of the finishing role that, he's doing pretty well this season. So, they're still marching on. And now they've kind of reverse flipped to put a little bit of pressure on Genk when they have to play that open game, because they've cut the kind of margin a little bit there. So, the title race is definitely still on. One side who would love to still and would want to get back into the title race and have definitely been playing a lot better in the past couple of weeks are Antwerp, and they hosted Standard Liège. Vincent Janssen just keeps on scoring. Really, really good header. It looked like the ball had kind of gone past him, but he somehow managed to flick it back across into the far corner. And that was within the first 10 minutes to give Antwerp a 1-0 lead. Really, really good atmosphere in this one. Really, really good atmosphere at the Borstel Stadium for this one. And Abnor Muya got another goal, and he's fast, like changing my opinion of him. He's looking a much better player. He's looking much more kind of comfortable in the league,
He's been
more
listening.
confident. Yeah, maybe I doubt it, but he just looks a lot more calm. Like he's making better decisions. He's a lot more like his confidence is kind of being displayed into his play, and he's like basically this game and the Oostende game. I thought he was really really good. So hold my hands up. He's been playing fantastically. He gets the second goal, really nice finish to make it 2-0 to Antwerp. So that's his. He got his first goal in the week. He's got his second one now. I think, as Will Downing said, surely he's going to get a call up for the Kosovo national team. I can't imagine that's not going to happen anytime soon. Standard did get back into it. Steven Alzate took advantage of kind of pretty poor defending from a free kick. He was completely unmarked. 40th minute, he makes it 2-1. But literally 2 minutes later, Antwerp are back ahead. Forward Merville Bacardi heading into his own net. Into the second half we go. Goike Simirot, he came in because obviously Nordesen is pretty much off to Moscow. That still needs to be confirmed. Not sure if it's been confirmed yet, but it looks like it's happening. So Goike Simirot was playing centre-back. He got a second yellow card in the 53rd minute. Pretty stupid, gets himself sent off, just puts his team in a whole load of trouble. Antwerp really should have scored so many more goals after that. They had all the space they could ever want for in the Bossel. 60% possession as well to end the game. Really dominant performance from them. Vincent Janssen did get them one more goal in the 87th minute to make it 4-1. And yeah, I don't want to kind of talk about this again because we've spoken about Standard, lack of quality. Looks like Raskin's going to Rangers, Amala to Valladolid. So that's probably it's the same kind of conversation we can have. But in terms of Antwerp, they just look, something's happened and they look so much better going forward. They look they're just more exciting to watch. Like the back just before the World Cup break, they were really dross and they were really hard to watch. Whereas now, like, I don't know what it is. Maybe it is Van Beeren's exciting and people are really excited to watch him. Stengs is playing really well in that deeper role. Muir obviously is probably outperforming Balakwisha, which like you wouldn't have expected, but he probably is. And then Janssen just keeps scoring the goals. So they are just like a more exciting side to watch. And I feel like the home fans are definitely feeling that.
Yeah, well, they've actually since the end of the World Cup, they have been really impressive. You're right; they've looked really aggressive and really hungry in their game, particularly the first couple of games back. I thought, they looked really up for it, and it was exciting to see that. And they were kind of steamrolling sides actually in a way that they hadn't done before. And they've largely continued that for the most part since we've come back. I thought Muya's goal was fantastic this weekend. I really enjoyed that goal. That was a great breakaway goal. Good example of the right pass at the right moment, particularly in a break, and a great finish from him. It's interesting that we're kind of focusing on them particularly a wee bit here, because last week you and I got very excited about how good Genk and Union have been and continue to be, and how it's going to be a really exciting title race between them. But I think this is the ideal opportunity to highlight, and this is where all the Antwerp fans are going to go, no, don't say what you're about to say, and that is they are very much in this title race. They are only 10 points off the top, and obviously if they maintain that, when the points halving, that's 5 and they're right back in it. But they're absolutely in it. Not just because the points say so, but also their performances have been really strong. And I think it's suited them for nobody really to be highlighting them too much. They've been able to kind of quietly go about their business while everybody, us included for the most part, have been raving about, kind of Genk and Union. But, it's definitely worth highlighting that Antwerp are absolutely in this title race at the moment. And kind of can't be discounted. I think it's very important that they bring in another striker before the window closes. Obviously, Michael Frey's gone to Gelsenkirchen. In fact, he's actually playing. He started He started for Schalke this evening, which I thought was interesting, right in there for them. So yeah, Michael Frey's gone. They are quite interested in Dutch striker Jarano Kerk, I think. He's somebody who they're reasonably close to at the moment, so I'm interested to see if they can complete on that. But I think that's going to be important because obviously if anything happens to Vincent Janssen, they're going to have a bit of a problem because they are probably overly reliant on him at the moment, so they need some backup as well as some kind of extra competition in the squad, up top there. So that's an important one to kind of keep an eye on. But they're actually looking very good, Ben. You're right, they are. And if they can keep this form up, it's going to be interesting for all of us to watch because we all want a title race, and I think actually this season we really are going to get it because I would expect. Despite the fact that Genk have got a pretty big lead at the moment, I would expect things to get a little bit tighter as we get nearer the playoffs, which were a number of weeks away off. Yeah, at least in the Pro League, anyway.
Yeah, 100%. We saw that last season, didn't we? Like Union had a pretty decent lead, and it was whittled down, and it just needs to be within reaching distance, and then you start to get the jitters. So I think it's what Joris was trying to tell us during the week. He's like, stop saying things have happened. He also reminded us that Napoli have a curse on them about winning the league, and I was like, yeah, they're going to win the league, completely forgetting about the curse that they have. So maybe we've reverse engineered it, and it's going to all be fine. But yeah, no, 100%. Interesting that Frey going to Schalke. I mean, that's a tough gig at the moment trying to keep them up. I'm sure Bundesliga fans remember him from his Nuremberg days when he really wasn't actually very good. So they're getting a very different striker now than what they had before. But yeah, I think Antwerp, they must know they need to get someone else in as kind of like a backup. So yeah, we'll see what they do there. Another side that is in desperate need of a striker, despite one of the ones they got scoring a brace in the week. Benito Raman scored 2 against Waregem, but they're happy to let him go. They're happy to kind of let everyone go. It feels like at the moment at Anderlecht, it's just a bit of a mess, to say the least. They've played Seraing, and it was just one goal that separated the sides. After that loss to Waregem, though, this was just one of those. Anderlecht just had to win it. Like there was no option. They couldn't even afford to draw it because I can imagine just the fallout from that would have been horrendous. Obviously, we've spoken about it, but Solango went into this game with basically a horrendous home record, no league wins at home in a year. It's now definitely going to be a year because I can't. The next home game is past that point of when they got that win against Beerschot last season, which is just a horrendous record. And you can't stay up in a league if your home form's going to be that bad. It's just not going to happen. Anders Dreyer got the assist in this one. Good to see him getting some pitch time. I mean, they said they wanted to kind of wait and see with him, like give him some time, but they spent money that they kind of need on him. They've let El Hadj go. Like, in my opinion, he has to hit the ground running now. Like, if you're going to let players go and bring this guy in on a reasonably large amount of money, considering what they have to use and work with, he needs to be ready to go and he needs to perform. And there has to be pressure on him to do that. Not his fault, but if that's what the guys, the Danes running the club, I guess we can call them now, want, they kind of have to expect that there is going to be that pressure on the player, no matter what you try and do to dumb it down. But it was another youngster who did actually put the ball in the back of the net. Mario Stoikens getting the goal. Could tell it meant a lot to him. There's a lot of emotion in that celebration. I guess a bit of frustration for Seraing in the fact that they only lost 1-0 to Anderlecht, and they were definitely in this game despite having less possession. They had chances and they really could have got something out of it, but the kind of noise coming out of Anderlecht is just very, very concerning in terms of they really want someone to replace Fabio Silva. They're not willing, by the look of it, to give Benito Raman a chance, and despite him scoring 2 goals, but it looks like they're going to have to sell Duranville to do that. And Dortmund apparently are willing to pay 10 million, which I think at the moment that's fine, but you got to put in some sell-on clauses on that kid, don't you, Scott? Because if you don't, you're going to regret it. The way Dortmund just take a player at 16, by 20 he's ready to move on, like the way they develop their players, and they just don't keep them. They're kind of like the next, I've always seen them as kind of like a feeder club for the big clubs in a sense, when I really wish they wouldn't be, because I feel like they could be, if they could just keep these players, they could be so competitive in the Bundesliga. They could actually challenge for the title consistently and actually win titles, but they don't. But if Duranville goes there, you just know that next step is going to come. So I hope Anderlecht do put some clauses in. But yeah, Murillo got an absolute battering on social media after his performance against Waregem. He actually started this one, which I was surprised. I thought Lima would have dropped him, but I don't know. we've spoken. Me and you have both said we like what we hear from Ream and stuff coming out of him. But I just felt if they lost this game, no matter what we say about it's a long term
Mm,
project and stuff like that, that squad is good enough to be beating Seraing
mm.
quite comfortably, regardless of what's going on. So I felt like he had to win it because even though he's only been there for a little bit of time, there would definitely be pressure
Yeah,
on
my
him.
word, they needed this actually. They really did. I think just to settle their nerves, even kind of momentarily. That slightly kind of toxic atmosphere around the club, which feels like it's been there for ages. And actually, Fredberg and Reimer are so good with the press. I think they both speak very well, are both very receptive, and I think have both had a really positive influence on the club since they came in. But such is the toxicity around the kind of political situation at the club that even that kind of seeps into the positives that are there. There's going to be a lot of change at Anderlecht, I think, over the next few months and over the summer. I think there's some big hitters there, both young big hitters and older big hitters, who I don't think are going to be there for that much longer. Obviously, Hendrik van Krombruge, he's going to be gone by the summer. Duranville's going to be gone probably before the end of this window. Adrian Treble's probably going to be away as well. But there's a good chance he won't be there over the summer, I think. And Amuzu and Sardella as well. I think there are big doubts as to whether they're going to be around beyond the summer. So, there's five or six, biggish, high profile names there that I don't expect to be there too much longer. And then there's going to be probably three or four coming in over the summer as they rework the squad. And Brian Reimer's a smart guy. He knows that he's got 19 or 20 games on this half of the season to work with the players, bed his ideas in, and get some lift around the place, hopefully in points as well. But he's not daft. He knows that next season, regardless of who comes in, that's when ultimately he's going to be judged, and the expectation is going to be to push for a playoff one place, and that's ultimately what he'll be judged on. I think obviously they were very closely linked with Thomas Henry over the last week or so, and then he sustained a really bad injury, which looks to have killed any potential deal there. But the first thing you said when we got onto this game was they really need to bring in a striker, and I think they do. Even Benito Raman scoring 2 goals within 60 seconds over the last few days for them is not going to be enough to change their mind about him being the main man. But yeah, they absolutely need that. Otherwise, I think they're going to be in a bit of a dogfight that they don't want to be in, because there is still enough quality in that squad at the moment to be a little bit further away from where they are than they are. But nobody's too good to go down. Anderlecht fans have been saying, look, the reality is, it is a possibility, and we're right in the mire here, and they're right about that. But I also agree with Brian Reimer when he said last week that, look, we could talk about all of the negative things inside and outside the club, but I prefer to have a different conversation. And he has to work with players and kind of get results and kind of shut all of that kind of toxicity out as much as possible, so that it doesn't seep into performances and their psyche and their motivation and things like that. And I think sometimes fans judge their team based on old expectations, and this is about Anderlecht fans maybe being a bit realistic and going, look, this isn't the club that it used to be. Circumstances have changed, and much like with their rival Standard, who are going through a major rebuild on and off the park, it is kind of the same for Anderlecht. And the potential 10 million fee for Duranville, that alone would go a long way to helping to finance a big part of a rebuild for next season. As well. So I think they just have to. Everybody has to be a bit more patient with Anderlecht. And I've seen even the legendary Paul van Himst this week was coming out saying that he had doubts about whether Reimer's going to get the time that he needs to embed his ideas. I don't think they have a choice, to be honest. I think they probably have the right man, but they do have to give him the time. And sometimes that involves a gutting of the squad, which is what we're seeing as well. Etel Hadj going to Genk, for what, from a Genk perspective, is a very good deal. Kind of 2 million up front, and then Anderlecht getting a big sell-on clause. So Anderlecht have got more money in this deal further down the line. If he kicks on there and gets his big transfer at some point. But yeah, yeah, just a bit more patience required. And I feel, and I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now, I generally feel a wee bit more optimistic about Anderlecht and their situation than perhaps their fans do. And that's maybe just because I think I can see kind of some of the positives going on there because of, not being a Mauve fan, you know what I mean, and not being so emotionally engaged in it. I can appreciate what the good work that's going on there. And I think there is a lot of good work. And I think they just have to allow Jesper Fredberg and Brian Reimer to do their job, because I think a lift will come for them. And I think it's a bit like Standard. Sometimes you have to clear out the players that just, their heart's not in it. They don't want to be there. So it's similar to Genk at the start of the season as well, with Wouter Franken, actually, when I think about it. There were lots of people thought Bongonda and Ito going was going to absolutely kill Genk, rip the heart out of them in a way, and that they were going to be very difficult to replace. But in actual fact, that hasn't proven to be the case. And I think the fact that both of those players wanted away had a very negative impact on that squad, and affected other players' performance. So it's kind of funny the way these things can work for you. And I think that's what's happening at Anderlecht at the moment. I think they're trying to turn the ship and bring some money in, because they need to, obviously, because effectively they're now a selling club, whether they like it or not. That's not a bad thing. It's just about how you use that, how you use that model. But yeah, but a bit of patience, because I think there's more positives than negatives going on at that club at the moment. And I think Anderlecht fans just have to kind of give themselves a break a little bit as well, because the reality is they're still 2 or 3 years away probably from seriously mounting a title challenge, and even then that's if everything kind of goes rosy for them. So they're in a similar boat to Standard fans, dare I say it, in that they just need to work at being more patient and relaxing a little bit, and staying off social media as well, because that's another thing. If you look at Anderlecht fans' social media activity, it can be a bit depressing, even when there are positives as well.
Yeah, I think you probably are seeing it a little bit more positively than most. I'm not sure. As long as they can just put together a little bit of good form on the pitch, I think then people will be able to settle down a bit. But I don't know. It just feels like it's kind of. I get with the Duranville and all that. I think you've got to think of the now over the future at the moment. Like, it is just kind of like, right, they're not even using him because of some injuries and stuff. And it's like, yes, he'll probably be good for you when in a couple of years, but you just don't have the time for that at the moment. You need to get the money in, rebuild the squad, start competing, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, he obviously, I think he could have gone in the summer, but to be fair to him, was like, no, I want to break through here first before I move on to what is a dream move for him to Dortmund. So fair play to him wanting to stay around to do that. But now I think he'll probably acknowledge, and if that was his opinion then, he wanted to play well for the club and do that, then he'll probably accept that, right, I need to go now for the good of the club. So yeah, fair play to him on that. Let's go to another side that actually can't win, can they? Club Brugge against Charleroi. What a ridiculous game this was. I'm surprised. Well, I'm kind of not surprised, but I am surprised that Yusuf Badji was not having anything in his loan deal that said he couldn't play against Club Brugge. But the man's only scored 1 goal for the season, so I'm sure they probably didn't care. Ironically, he then gets his second goal of the season against Club Brugge. Really good finish, actually. Didn't celebrate, which I was kind of like, oh, mate, you should probably just celebrate, because you've had such a hard time of it in front of goal. Your confidence has been shot. You've hit the back of the net, like, get yourself some confidence. Just give it a little bit of a celebration. Do you know what I mean? Like, show them that you care and you're happy about that, because he really did need a goal. He just looks like a kid that has no confidence. It's really hard to see, and I think he needs to get out of Charleroi, and I think he needs to go be loaned to a completely different league or something, to just go and bang the ball in the back of the net, maybe like a second division somewhere else where he can find a little bit of consistency and easy opposition, because he's still young and you don't want this to kind of be like a killer mental thing for him. But it was good to see him scoring, not if you're a Club Brugge fan, obviously. So that's in the 13th minute. 3 minutes later, Club Brugge are 2-0 down. Vander Mechelen, second own goal of the month, which now makes him Club Brugge top scorer for the month, which I'm sure he's being reminded of. Good play from Joris Kayembe. He fires it in, it kind of ricochets around, hits Mekele. Both of the goals he scored as own goals, he literally couldn't do anything about. It's just unfortunate circumstance. After the game, Felice Mazu and a couple of the players said, if we went in at 2-0 up at half-time, we win this game. Unfortunately for them, Damien Mark decided he didn't want that to happen. He gives away a penalty. Noah Lang steps up, who I have to say, this is one of the best Noah Lang games I've seen for a long, long time. I thought he was the best player on the pitch well, especially for Club Brugge, he was just getting kicked to pieces. And that's when you know Noah Lang's playing well, when teams are trying to kick him because they want to get him riled up. They want to get him booked. He obviously did get booked because it's Noah Lang, but he was good. He was really, really good. He was the only one that looked like he really wanted it for Club Brugge out there. That was until Andreas Skov came on at half time, and that sub just like that did make a massive difference twice during this game. He gets the goal on the 50th minute to make it 2-2. He's then the one that's breaking away when Mehdi Buchmir just absolutely wipes him out. Stonewall red card, like no debate about that whatsoever. However, it did look like there was a foul down the other end, which would have been for Charleroi, which wasn't given by the referee. So that's where the frustration, I think, if you're watching the game, that's what their frustration was on the side. They were like, well, why don't you give the foul down there? You've now caused us to have this. But Club just couldn't capitalise on this. Again, they had loads of chances, but just couldn't find the back of the net. Herve Coffey made a couple of good saves. So Scott Parker is still looking for his first win. And, right, so I spoke about how like I didn't actually mind some of the stuff he said in his press conferences about wanting to bring back that kind of mentality and stuff like that. But this is the third game in a row where he's just come out and absolutely slammed the team, where he's been like, "This, I don't want to be associated with this. This is not the way we should play." Blah blah blah. It's like, mate, you've said this after every single game. Do something about it then. Like you can talk about it here, but what are you doing? Like why are they doing this? This is 3 games in a row where you've come and said this to the press, which makes a great soundbite. But what, like, change something then? Do something with the team, like, because at the end of the day, like, you can say that, and if you keep saying that, like, no one's going to believe it much longer. Do you know what I mean? Like, we want to see the change there. I do think they're not actually that far away from winning, and I think once they win, I think they will go on a run because they've shown signs in games that they are still a very, very good team. And I think once he gets that win, I think it can go on a run because they're such a strong side. But just hearing that after every single game, it's just a bit like, right, let's hear something different then. Like, what did you see that you liked? What, like, Noah Lang played really well. Like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of the positives. Like, you came back from 2-0 down. That's great. Skov Olsen came on and changed the game for you. People questioning why he took off Van Aken. I was questioning why Jutgler only came on with 10 minutes to go. But then Joris pointed out to us, I'll plug for Joris what he said to us, look at the form. Jutgler actually hasn't been on great form recently from, like, I think it was like week 6, he said, or something like that. So that's why Yaremchuk's starting. But again, he hasn't been on any good form at all, which we've spoken about. I also have to say, I don't know if you watched this one as well, Scott, but even down to 10 men, I thought Charleroi were really, really good. And they actually had a lot of the ball and they were still creating chances. And I haven't watched it back to kind of recognise it, but there's something about Felice Mazu against former Premier League players. We saw it last year against Vincent Kompany. He just outcoached him every single time. In this one, it felt like he just kind of could read everything he needed. He tactically played the game really well. Even when they went down to 10 men, it was the classic Mazu where it's like, we're not just going to sit back and defend. We can still go and win this game. This team's fragile. I'm going to use my Nkuba Kembe. I'm going to bring on Descott. I'm going to bring on Chachwa to try and kind of change things up. Van Kleenput came on as well. So it's kind of half and half. I'm not concerned for the club because I think they will win soon. It is definitely coming and they will go on a run because I think Noah Lang's starting to look good. Skov Olsen's obviously back and that's good. But I'm also a little bit like, I don't want to hear about this. I don't want to be associated with this team. Like, I wasn't proud of that performance, blah, blah, blah. Like, just do that tell that to the team. In the press, let's talk about some other stuff. I know people probably think, you've probably got a biased opinion about Scott Parker because I didn't think he was the right person for the job, which I don't. But there are signs that they will win under him. And it's just a little bit of a pet peeve I've got at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, they've not had the new manager bounce, but Club Brugge's longest winless streak, I think, is 8 games, which goes back to 1981. They're now on the cusp of equaling that. So they're struggling for confidence and struggling for ideas a little bit, I think. There's no doubt about that. I mean, Scotty Parker even said that, actually. He felt their mental strength was a little bit fragile. I think a lot of people are asking some questions already, to be honest. I mean, I've certainly seen some club fans speculating they might not even be there come the Benfica game coming up as well. So there's a little bit of disquiet already in some quarters about what they've seen very, very early doors. But it is that. It's exactly that. It's very early doors yet. A little bit of Charleroi news actually today. Before we move on, Ali Golazade's wife has gone back to Iran for personal reasons. And Felix Mazou's been talking about how his head's not been quite in the right place linked to that. So we could be seeing Ali Golazade leave during this window. That's what I think. There's definitely a possibility about that now. So we'll keep an eye on that one as well, because obviously he's a big player.
Yeah, no, he definitely is. And I think it's about time that he probably did move on. I think he's probably been there just a little bit too long. So, yeah, it's probably the right time for Golazade to kind of depart. And, I mean, they've improved under Mazou, like, a fair amount, I'd say. Like, despite not having a striker, they're actually scoring a couple of goals, even if Brandon Mekele is scoring them for them. But, I mean, fair play. They are now kind of looking more at playoff 2 than they are behind them, which is just, I mean, that's probably what they wanted when they brought in Mazou. Let's go to the final game of the weekend quickly then, which was Ghent against St. Truden. This game was kind of ruined in the 16th minute when Aboubakari Koita was sent off for just the most stupid thing I've ever seen. Like, just isn't a red card. Like, anyone that plays football knows that's not a red card. It's just, as he's dribbling, his foot kind of like, I'm making it probably sound worse than it was, like slips down. I think it's Hong Shin. But like, it's just, it's not what he's not trying to do that. It's not a tackle. He's not even tackling him. It's like just an accident that shouldn't be given as a red card. And it killed the game to the point where St. Truden were like, enough is enough, and wrote a letter to the Belgian FA, which I thought was quite funny. Yeah, apart from that, Ghent obviously then went on to win this one quite comfortably against the 10 men. Ibrahim Salah got a goal in the 34th minute. Nice finish from him. Then 2 really good goals from that man, Hugo Kuipers, again. Basically either side of half-time, rounded this one off for Ghent. 75% of possession. I mean, St. Truden only had 25%, and it was just at home. They've not been very good. But when they're down to 10 minutes, it was always going to be difficult, especially Koita, who's kind of like been, like the last couple of games, he's actually played really, really well. So it's kind of a shame that I think they have overturned it. I think I've read something about they have now overturned it, and everyone was like, you've overturned it because of a refereeing mistake. But that's not what they said. But yeah, a good win for Ghent. And after the Club Brugge result, Ghent now leapfrog them into the top 4, and that'll be a concern for Club Brugge hierarchy and Scott Parker, because as long as they're in the top 4, I think that there's less pressure.
Yeah, interesting actually. You know, I'm just thinking about the Koita red card. Our Yoris described that this week as a new low, which made me laugh kind of quite a lot. And when you watch it, I think that's a brilliant description of it. It's just it's ludicrous. It's just absolutely ludicrous. But it's so ludicrous, it's kind of worth seeking out. So go and Google it if you haven't already seen it, because you'll think it's as ludicrous as we do. But yeah, a new low, our Yoris described it as. I like that. Big win for Ghent this actually. I wonder what impact this might have on them psychologically, leapfrogging club. Albeit temporarily for the moment, and Kuipers starting to really warm up again, I think is important for them as well. So I think that could do their confidence and perhaps their mentality the world of good to leapfrog them, because they have been a bit up and down. They were really awful against Union in the Cup recently, and equally around that they've turned in some decent performances, of which this was one as well. So Big Hein will be happy this week, I think, and be able to sit the squad down and say to them, look at this like a marker. We're where we want to be now. Let's stay there. That's the challenge, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That is kind of the consistency challenge for them. But they've shown that they can go on runs, and when they've got someone scoring goals in Kuipers, like defensively, they should be quite solid. So it's going to be tough now between those two sides, because you need to hit some good form. Like Ghent do have that, like you said, they can perform well, but then they can perform badly. It's the consistency they've been lacking, and it's just sometimes you just don't know which side's going to turn up. They'll either like scrape through a 1-0 win against a poor side, but then absolutely go and dismantle a good side. And if you're high and you're like, well, what's the what's the difference each time? Like, why does this keep happening? But yeah, again, another eventful week in the Pro League. There's just action all over the table everywhere you look. That's also the case in the Challenger, isn't it, Scott? So why don't you give everyone a quick rundown of what's been happening in a pretty big weekend, actually, in the Challenger Pro League?
Yeah, it has been a big weekend, and the Challenger's back. It's back from its winter break this past weekend. Quick score rundown. Club Next beat Lommel 2-1. Young Genk against SL16 was postponed for the same reasons as Up and Genk, actually. The bad snow in Belgium put pay to that. Molenbeek beat Denza 2-1. Dender and Virton played out a 7-goal thriller, Virton managing to win that 4-3. Beveren in the big top of the table game against Beerschot ran out 2-0 winners, and Anderlecht under-23s played out a 6-goal thriller, actually, in Brussels, drawing 3 each with Lierse. So we're now 3 games away from the Pro League, Challenger Pro League playoffs. So it's getting really, really exciting. Big bit of news, actually, over the last week. Molenbeek's sporting director, Gorius, has left the club by mutual consent, apparently. A little bit of kind of political turmoil at the background at Molenbeek for various reasons at the moment. And I think he's been a casualty of that. Top scorer at the moment remains Beveren's Tierno Barry, who got his 13th of the season this weekend. He's now on 13 and 19, having a great time, obviously enjoying himself. And I think he's a player who's been really important to Beveren, and they'll be hoping to hold on to him as long as possible. There is plenty of interest there. But they'll be hoping that he can stick around and be a Pro League player with them next season. No doubt about that at all. Interestingly, there was actually over 6,000 at the Free Teal this weekend, which is brilliant to see such a big crowd coming out to support their local team. Somebody else who was in the house at the Free Teal this weekend as well was the man and the legend that is Jean-Marie Pfaff. Needs no introduction from me. Legendary goalkeeper, 64 caps for the Red Devils, 10 years at Beveren between 72 and 82, 305 appearances in goal for Beveren as well. He was around, and it's always nice to see legends like that kind of coming out, much like we did with Eric Giretz a couple of weeks ago as well. I quite enjoyed that. So Beveren have gone top by virtue of results this weekend, and Young Genk are bottom at the moment, although obviously they have a game in hand. So it's getting pretty tight, actually, and it's definitely looking like a kind of 3-way fight between Beveren, Molenbeek and Beerschot for that automatic promotion spot, because remember, everybody, 1 goes up and 3 are coming down.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very tense. If you haven't watched the highlights already, definitely watch that Tierno Barry first goal. Not for the finish, but for the pass that he does, like kind of the hockey pass or whatever it is, the pre-assist pass. It's an incredible pass from him, actually. Another observation, I was watching the highlights, and Molenbeek's ground just... I've been thinking about it for ages. Like, where does it remind me of? It reminds me of Oxford's ground. If anyone's seen it, because it's got that bloody car park just behind it, and it's just like the Oxford car park. It's just like they've ported it over to Belgium, and that's the Molenbeek Stadium. Obviously, we're going to keep our eyes on that as we get into the playoffs and kind of the first season of this new format in the Challenger Pro League. But yeah, Beveren on top, Molenbeek just behind with a point, and then Beerschot just 2 points behind. So it's really, really, really tight. It's probably all we've got time for this week. As always, Scott, thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure. See you next week, everyone.
Yes, we certainly will. We'll be back next week with another episode. If you do like what we do, though, please do leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. You can also get in touch with us as well if you agree with what we said, disagree with what we said, or just want to kind of ask any questions, especially with the transfer window slamming shut. If you're supportive of the team, also just let us know kind of, what players you want your team to sign. If you think Oostende need a new goalkeeper as well, if you can think of one they can actually go and get, maybe get in touch with the club, because I'm sure they'd be open to that kind of approach. Anyway, thanks as always for listening to this episode of the Belgian Football Podcast, and we'll be back next week with another episode.